Let's move on now and take a look at what's been making headlines in the international press this Monday morning. And Haxi Myers-Belkin is back with me here on set for that. And the paper's unsurprisingly full of reaction to the sixth and most powerful nuclear test from North Korea.
Absolutely. So British online paper The Eye is leading with the headline "North Korea H-bomb sends shockwaves around the world" against a picture of the North Korean leader and what appears to be a nuclear warhead. French centre-left paper Libération has also opted for a picture of Kim Jong-un during a military parade. "A ticking time bomb" is the headline there. We read that the country's latest nuclear test appears to cement the North's position as a global nuclear power. The question it asks, what is Trump going to do? Now, British centre-right paper The Times, meanwhile, is focusing on the Pentagon's warning of a massive military response in conjunction with its threats to sever trade ties with China and South Korea if they don't do more to rein in Pyongyang.
And Haxi, you've also found a piece that focuses on a specific threat within that announcement from North Korea yesterday that's somewhat gone under the radar.
Yes, and that element is the North's threat to use an electromagnetic pulse, stay with me, to shut down the US electricity grid. Now, this might sound pretty far-fetched, but as we read in this piece in the Wall Street Journal, an EMP, that's what they're called, could be triggered by a nuclear weapon detonated in space, kilometres and kilometres above the Earth. Now, electromagnetic waves from the explosion would generate pulses that would overwhelm the grid. Now, that wouldn't directly kill anyone or destroy any buildings, but in a worst-case scenario, it could result in months-long power shortages, thereby indirectly killing thousands, what with food and water shortages and hospitals obviously having no power. Now, this article believes the North is still a long way off using EMPs as a weapon of war, but it does note that we should probably start researching how the damage of any such attack could be prevented.
You've also been taking a look at how the press in Korea has been reacting to this test.
So one mass circulation paper called Ibo is seeing this atomic test as the last straw and is leading the charge in calling for Seoul to acquire its own nuclear weapons, something it claims is necessary now that its historic relationship with Washington appears to be on the rocks. Now, that sense of uncertainty is also echoed across the letters pages of the Korean press today. This letter in the Korea Times is written by a teacher who's keen to dig beneath what she describes as people's insistence on remaining calm in the face of the threat. She says she has been thinking about what to do in the event of an attack. She says she's identified the shelter nearest her home, that she's already stocked up on emergency items like food, a radio, blankets, enough food and water for an entire month. And she also mentions that a friend of hers told her that she'd already planned to sit down with her husband and a nice bottle of wine if they believe they only have a few minutes to live.
We've also, of course, been hearing from Washington, Trump having some strong words for Seoul in the hours after Pyongyang's atomic test.
Absolutely. He accused the South of appeasement, of course. And here the New York Times asks why Trump chose to direct his anger at Seoul rather than putting on a united front. Now, we read here that it stems from Trump's inability to separate foreign policy from trade policy. He wants cooperation on Pyongyang, of course, while also wanting to renegotiate a trade deal with Seoul. Now, an Obama-era national security official derides this approach. She says it appears haphazard at a time when what's needed right now is mutual support and coordination.
Okay, let's move on now to the ongoing political crisis in Venezuela, and some key opposition figures are in Europe for the next couple of days, trying to rally support for their cause among European leaders.
They are, and as we read in this piece in the Huffington Post, this Monday, French President Emmanuel Macron is meeting with Julio Borges and Freddy Guevara. Now, they're the president and the vice president of Venezuela's National Assembly, a body that has recently been stripped of all its power by those loyal to Socialist President Nicolas Maduro. Now, we read here that both men are currently being investigated by a new so-called Truth Commission on charges of treason because of their support for US sanctions on the Venezuelan ruling class. Now, the opposition insists that is simply proof of the government's push to silence dissent. Now, one woman who was meant to be in Europe for meetings with EU leaders is Lilian Tintori. And now she's the wife of an opposition leader who himself is under house arrest. Now, her passport was seized without explanation as she tried to board a plane in Caracas. This piece in the Huffington Post recounts President Macron's response to the news. He tweeted that he was still expecting to meet with Tintori in Europe and that the Venezuelan opposition had to have the right to travel. Now, that tweet was, as you might expect, met with fury by the Venezuelan foreign minister, who replied by saying that he rejected Macron's statement. Macron, who blindly follows the European far-right's opposition to Venezuela. So only time will tell if Tintori does indeed manage to make it to Europe, but hopes aren't too high at the moment.
Haxi Myers-Belkin with the International Press Review. Thank you very much. It's time now for another quick break. Don't go anywhere. There's more world news and headlines coming up after this. Do stay tuned.